Okay, so last week we did the crucial concepts for 3.1, which I gave the disclaimer that is a beast. The rest of book 3, once you have conquered 3.1, the rest of book 3 feels very manageable. So I'm going to go through this hopefully pretty quickly. In 3.2, so you have you've introduced kids to those 2-syllable words, multisyllabic words using just closed syllables. That's what you accomplish in 3.1. In 3.2, now we introduce the concept of blends, like adding to. So we have that foundation of multisyllabic, simple closed syllables. Now we're adding blends. So for example, like the word grandchild, right? We have a blend at the beginning of the first syllable, a blend at the end of the first syllable, and then another blend at the end of the second syllable. Also in 3.2, so it's just like slightly more complex than 3.1. And you continue to practice those syllable division rules. So in the word grand and child, this is a compound word. So grand is going to stay by itself and child is going to stay by itself. You would split right between those two words. You also in 3.2 introduce them to additional closed syllable prefixes, which we have here on our prefix wall. We try to always keep the prefixes circled in all of our like anchor charts to remind kiddos that they should constantly be circling those affixes, both prefixes and suffixes. So you can see some of these closed syllables: mid, un, trans, non, sub, miss, im, in, mn, dis, com, con, full, ab, ad, x, and pro. Well, pro is not a closed syllable, so that comes later. But the rest of those are closed syllables. And then you practice, once you've introduced them to some of those syllables, you now incorporate those, once you've introduced them to some of those prefixes, you now incorporate those prefixes into the multisyllabic words. So now we have dis attached to the base word trust. The whole word is distrust. In 3.3, you introduce 2 blends. So we have them here. Where are they? CT and inked, right here. So we introduce the blend CT because it comes at the end of words and it is super common. So the blend coming at the end of words CT, and then inked, which is just a variation of the CT blend. So we introduce these 2 blends or sounds. This is more of a sound. And there are not very many words that use this sound, so I don't spend a ton of time on that. We really focus on the CT blend because it's so common. And then in this 3.3 subset, we introduce some of these really common Latin bases, especially the ones that end in the CT. So dict, duct, fect, flect, flicked, and so on. There are a whole bunch of them. So we introduce them for meaning. We're not looking for mastery of meaning. We want to make sure they can meet the decoding and encoding benchmarks for all of Wilson pacing, but we're not looking for them to have the meaning mastered. This template is one that we use frequently once we get into book 2 and 3. So I might, if I introduce the base, flect, because it's a CT base, which would very much coincide with what we're doing in 3.3. Then I might say, okay, how many, using prefixes from our prefix wall, using the suffixes that you learned thus far, how many words can you make with the word with the base flect? Have them work together or individually. This is a great activity for them to do while you're charting if you're working in a group. And they can use that word matrix to kind of build on those concepts. So that is 3.3. After 3.3, we have 3.4. All 3.4 does is moves into 3 and 4 syllable words. So for example, you've mastered 2 syllable, now we're going to do basketball, ball, right? So we are just moving from those 2 syllable to 3 and 4 syllable words. 3.4 can go either way. Some kiddos really struggle, like they'll have those 2 syllable words, but then once you introduce that extra syllable or 2, they're like, oh my gosh, this is way too long. And then for lots of kids, once they have that multisyllabic ability, another syllable or 2 doesn't really throw them off. So it really depends on the kid or the group how quickly you move through 3.4. And then in 3.4, once they know the concept of 3 and 4 syllable words, you'll reinforce those prefixes you've done, like dis, con, nect, right? This is technically 2 different prefixes put in front of this base nect. So again, you have all the pieces to work with and you start building on those. And lastly, 3.5, you introduce 2 more suffixes. 3.5 is nice because book 3 is such a beast by the time you get, like, you're in book 3 forever. So it's really nice that 3.5 usually goes really quickly. You just introduce the 2 suffixes. So you introduce ed, well, the suffix ed, I should say the suffix ed and the suffix ing. For the suffix ed, it makes 3 sounds, and so we add this to their student notebook. 3 sounds the suffix ed can make. It can make ed, it can make d, and it can make t. So for example, I jumped today, yesterday I jumped. So it makes that sound even though we spell it with an ED. So I like to introduce this as anytime you're turning a word, a base, into past tense, you're going to use the only suffix that turns things into past tense, which is ed. So make sure they add this to their student notebook so they have that for a visual. And then ing is, in book 3, we only are adding ing to closed syllables, which doesn't change the spelling. So I'm trying to think of a word. So like, I am winging this video right now, right? So the base word wing is a closed syllable. They have the skills to attack that word, and we're adding the ing suffix to it. Once we get into book 4, then we will have to dive into spelling rules for adding the suffix ing to words, but for closed syllables, it does not change the spelling, so it's a pretty straightforward concept to teach. And that is book 3.